Squish the Spy, Episode 2. This video is a part of a series of videos that are all based on a scenario in a novel I wrote titled Meanie and Kaka. It is available on Amazon Kindle if you are interested in the complete story. The characters share a common time frame and connected plot, but can be read as standalone adventures. The stories make more sense if you read or listen to them in order. The correct order and links are listed in the description. Each video takes me some time to put together, so please be patient. I am working on it. I am anxious to learn what you think of them, and of course, like and subscribe and help me get my channel off the ground. That's if you like my work. Now the story. Squish the Spy. It's a normal morning and Squish walked into his office as usual. Maury, the vice executive, was in her office and didn't notice him come in. She always gets in before he does, no matter how early he comes in. He wondered how she managed to do that. He was the CEO of Co Mining and Refining Company, a successful and growing company. He was initiating his daily morning ritual and logged onto his terminal. A private message prompt appeared on the monitor. It was from Goxus, the owner of the company. This is too early, he thought to himself. He's retired and likes to sleep in. This was very unusual and didn't feel good. He opened the message, and it read, "They've made contact. I need you and Maury to come over here now." His big ears on his big gray head dropped to his chin. That meant dread. He stood up and walked to the door and opened it to find Maury standing immediately on the other side. "We've got to go," she said, with both eyes looking into his. She had already summoned a vehicle and driver to take them to Goxus's mansion. At first, they sat in the back seat without saying a word. Squish finally spoke. "This doesn't look good." "Why haven't we heard anything about it?" she wondered. Something else must be up, he surmised. This was a day both had hoped would never come. They arrived at the huge estate and walked up to the front door. The servant opened the door just as they approached and greeted, "Good morning, Mr. Squish and Madam Maury. Mr. Goxus is waiting in his office." "Good morning to you, Mr. Frang," Squish answered. Squish and Maury never liked being so formal. Frang refused their persistent requests to call them just by their names, so they always reciprocated by being formal with him. It became a private joke. He smiled, then escorted them to Goxus's office. They walked in to find Kisk and Dost sitting at the conference table. Kisk and Dost were former crew members and old friends. They sat there quietly, looking nervous. "Hi, Squish," Goxus greeted from his desk. "I want you to meet a new friend," he said, pointing to the couch behind them. They turned to look. Both their ears popped up almost to the top of their big gray heads. There, sitting on the couch, was an alien. Squish and Maury were accustomed to aliens. They each had spent more time in space than on their home world. But this alien was different. Its presence made them very uncomfortable. They were nervous because many years earlier, while performing routine salvage and surveying, they inadvertently killed thousands of them on a space station they assumed to be abandoned and dropped a nuclear device on one of their planets they thought was uninhabited. On top of that, they destroyed all of the evidence of their deeds. If all that were to be exposed, they would be in considerable trouble. "Hello, Mr. Squish and Ms. Maury," the female greeted through the translation device. "My name is Nadia. We call ourselves humans, and the planet we come from, we call Millennia, but our species originated on a planet called Earth." "I know, you've seen our species before. Please sit down," she requested. They slowly sat down, and she remained standing. "First, let me ease your mind by explaining that we have no intention of exposing your accidental destruction of one of our stations and the detonation of a nuclear device on our city. We know it was an accident." Squish was relieved but suspicious. He sensed they wanted something. Even though we had developed faster than light travel years ago and had established several colonies in space, we had not made contact with any other advanced culture. We did not have any way of determining who attacked us. Eventually, our scientists deciphered the telemetry data on the FTL transmitter you left behind at the smelter, and it led us back to this planet. Because we thought we'd been attacked, we're very cautious in approaching your civilization. After observing your activity for a while, It became obvious to us that the incident was not an act of war. We decided to make contact with your government. They were quite gracious and excited. When we inquired about the incident, they explained that it was not an attack, but a routine planet prospecting procedure. The station was punctured with metal projectiles to decompress any pressurized gas tanks left behind that could cause transport problems. And the nuclear device was just part of a test to determine if the crust was suitable for the development of substantial mineral deposits. When we asked them if they would investigate to find out who did it, they declined, because the incident occurred well after the statute of limitations had run out, and their regulations prohibit it. They also explained that when advanced civilizations first make contact, the exchange of information is invaluable. It can fill many holes in each other's scientific knowledge. This greatly benefits both parties. The release of such information would threaten that process. Your government has no interest in finding out who did it. We only found out it was you because we managed to recover the sensors you left on the surface of the planet when you did your core survey, the ones that measured the shock waves from the nuclear explosion. They were discovered sometime after the blast. No one connected them to the explosion. Our scientists just assumed some other civilization left some seismographic gear behind. Once we found out that the bomb wasn't an attack but a standard prospecting operation, we connected the sensors to the explosion and quietly traced them to you. I must say, you caused us to undergo a huge military expansion program. Things sometimes work out much differently than you expect, Nadia explained. As part of the buildup, we stationed warning sensors all around our territories. It wasn't too long before we discovered that we were being spied on by ships hiding in static fields. It wasn't difficult to trace the communication signals. They led us to Toland, a very Earth-like planet. When we initially jumped out, we were immediately detected by the Creek Federation. They were very friendly and wanted to know all about us. By combining our two technologies, our scientists developed a translation program, and we quickly learned to communicate. On Toland, just like on Earth, the mountains and oceans had separated their populations, so as to develop different cultures and political factions. When we asked who on their planet would be most likely to be spying on us, they pointed us to the most likely culprit. The Groins, Kisk responded dryly. Yes, I see you've heard of them. We've done business with them before, Squish stated. They produce good spacecraft at a reasonable price, but you have to be a skilled negotiator to deal with them. They are a corrupt, dictatorial theocracy and will get away with anything you let them. We haven't had any dealings with them for some time, he added. Nadia elaborated, the Groins have committed considerable resources into setting up this network, and we need to find out why they are spying on us. The Creeks have reached a limit on what they can or want to do to help us, and some humans poking around would not work out too well. We are asking you if you would go in and find out what they are up to. Just to reassure you, this is not blackmail or extortion. We have an agreement with your government that keeping this confidential is the wisest course of action. We intend to keep your secret, regardless of what you decide. The only ones outside this room that know the truth are my immediate supervisors, who also happen to be my mother and father. Kisk spoke deliberately. May I ask what you do? Nadia took a moment, then replied, I apologize. I should have told you when I introduced myself. I am a scientist. I specialize in alien cultures. May I ask you something else? He continued. Yes, of course. How many died in the explosion? His voice quivered. It was noticeable through the translation unit. She thought for a second and answered sadly, 150,000. Kisk began trembling slightly. Did you know anyone? Anyone that died in the attack? I'm sorry, but I have to know. Nadia paused, then answered, My mother was killed when you purged the station. I was a child at the time. I survived in the lander that managed to drop to the surface. Kisk looked up to Nadia with sad eyes. It is strange that you and I once traveled together. Dost and I piloted the ship that hauled the station your lander was docked to. There was a long silence where he seemed in deep thought. His eyes slowly turned towards Nadia. The words, I'm sorry, just aren't adequate. he said. I fired the metal balls that killed your mother, and I launched the rocket that destroyed your city. You had no idea. How could you? She consoled. For most of his life, Kisk had trusted no one but Squish and fellow spacers. He had only met this alien a few moments ago, and in that brief time, she had earned his trust. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, regained his posture, then declared, I'm in. Tell me what you want me to do. He turned to Squish, Mori, and Dost and announced, You can stay home. I think it's best if I handle this by myself. Not going to happen, Dost exclaimed. I go with my leader, he added. I'm going as well, Squish chimed in. Me too, Mori spoke up. You would probably mess it up without me. Squish turned and asked, Well, Nadia, what's next? The mood in the room got a little less melancholy. They had a mission. We're sending you to Groins City, she answered, at the only factory they have that can produce those static stasis ships. You're to see if you can find out what they're up to. Your cover story is that your company is interested in purchasing some spacecraft. Your presence will not raise any suspicions since they undoubtedly know who you are. Remember, your first contact will be the sales broker, and asking questions is what customers do. We will have to go where the leads take us after that. You will be carrying a standard translation device, and it has been modified to function as a communication unit. It will be monitoring all of your conversations, and it will also track your location. You leave in 6 hours, so you can go home and pack. Once they reached the exec ship, they settled in for the 2-day trip. Goxus messaged the Groins that they were in the market for new cargo craft, and that they were sending a team. They responded and will be waiting for their arrival. Nadia and Mori were to stay in orbit aboard the exec ship, and Squish, Kisk, and Dost will meet the sales representative. Normally, when visiting any developed planet, they would dock to a transit station, then take a shuttle lander to the surface. Taking a private lander to the surface presented an image of wealth and status, and they thought it might be easier to make a hasty escape with it. They arrived at the spaceport and taxied to a hangar. They did not need to enter the terminal. The salesman and a vehicle were waiting for them outside the hangar. Squish stepped off the ship first and walked up to the salesman that was waiting a short distance away. The Groins were tall, bipedal, and ugly. He always considered them the ugliest species in known space. But this one was by far the ugliest groin he'd ever seen. He wondered if other Groins thought the same, or did they have different beauty standards? Greetings, Mr. Squish and Party, emanated from his translation unit that was strapped to his belt. His actual voice sounded very growling. My name is Jump, and I am your sales representative. Good to meet you, Squish said with a short bow. He pointed toward his team that had just joined them. This is Kisk, our chief engineer, and Dost his assistant and pilot. Very pleased to meet you, Jump greeted. Please, this way, he said, and opened the door to the large limousine. The vehicle was an imported high-end luxury model and very comfortable. It was a hybrid that rolled on wheels in city traffic and hovered over the highway. Did you have a pleasant journey? He asked, engaging in obligatory small talk. Yes, very nice, Squish answered. They drove onto a very rough road that quickly turned into dirt. Obviously, they did not spend much on infrastructure outside their capital city. He looked out the window as they passed through the impoverished slum. The modern skyline of the city in the distance accentuated the income inequality of the culture. They turned a corner and came to a large ornate gate that was obviously the entrance to the factory grounds. It was big and obviously built to intimidate and impress. The gate automatically opened in front of them. They drove straight into the main manufacturing building and began touring the factory. It was a massive high-energy facility. The multiple massive furnaces simultaneously mixed the various metals, then molded the alloys into various hull sections. While touring the facility, they became impressed with Jump's knowledge. He answered even the most technical inquiries expertly at the top of his head. Then, the moment of truth came, and Kisk took the initiative. He asked, "Can you construct a ship that can develop a static stasis field?" "Oh yes, of course," he answered enthusiastically. "In fact, we are presently building a few for the government. Come, I'll show you." That was easy, Squish thought to himself. He ushered them to the another section of the factory. Dost inquired as nonchalantly as he could, "What do they use them for?" Jump instantly replied, "We use them to buy slaves." Several years ago, we stumbled across an unknown advanced alien civilization. Although they had developed faster than light travel, they had not come into contact with anyone else. Hidden in stasis fields, we observed and monitored all their transmissions. In time, our computers deciphered their languages. We came up with a plan that solves one of our recurring problems. You see, our religion requires us to feast on preppy fruit every quarter equinox. Our religion strictly prohibits us from physically touching the fruit until the day of celebration, which means the harvesting has to be performed by someone else. We normally hire workers from other lands, but that has become increasingly expensive. When our technicians found out how to tap into their communication system, we contacted a head of one of their powerful criminal organizations in one of their corrupt countries and offered to trade for some of their people. This is a common practice in some places on their planet. "What did you use for trade?" Kisk asked. "Gold," he answered. Gold is useful for producing electronic circuitry, but not much else, so Kisk was puzzled. Jump explained. "On their planet, it is very valuable. All the wealthy countries hoard it." Kisk thought back to the humans on the station and remembered that many had adorned themselves with gold. He also noticed that Nadia wore gold ornaments on her ears. "One small brick buys us 10 slaves. The exchange process is rather simple," he explained. "At a prearranged time, we drop down and leave the gold near a secluded road. Then we leave. Later, they deliver the slaves, take the gold, and go home. A short time later, we come back and pack them into a small ship and bring them here. They don't know that they are dealing with aliens from another planet." Up in the exec ship, Nadia and Maury are listening in. Squish's specially modified translation unit was transmitting the conversation. "Ask them where they keep them," Nadia pleaded out loud, even though she knew Squish couldn't hear her. To her relief, Squish asked, "Can we see them? The slaves?" "Of course, we can take the car. The farm is just outside the city." They drove out for a while, then turned onto a narrow road. The field came into view. They could see the many ragged male, this female, and young humans that were harvesting a small purple fruit. The vehicle drove close to where they could plainly watch them work. Only a few guards were watching them, but were brandishing whips. The experience moved Squish deeply. Witnessing actual slaves, even aliens, affected him more than he ever could have imagined. It did not take an expert in human physiology to see that they were in terrible shape. He could see they were undernourished, overworked, and without hope. The vehicle drove near a group working at the edge of the field. They all ignored the vehicle as it slowly passed, except for one female. She was bending over next to a child about to pick up a basket. Suddenly looking up, she and Squish locked eyes. They were beings that had evolved on separate planets, hundreds of light years apart. But there must be some universal unspoken nonverbal language, because the message she sent was clear and unmistakable. Her glare of contempt pierced straight through his heart. She looked away, then walked out with the basket of fruit. Then the stark truth hit him. He was no better than the Groins. He too owned slaves, although he didn't think of them that way. He had initially set up a metal recycling plant on a remote planet around a tribe of what he called animals that he would use for labor. They lived in a large hot cavern near where he built the facility. He just took a part of the tribe to work his smelter. The remainder he left behind to provide food and replacements. They had no choice. To Squish, they were just wild animals, to be tamed for his purposes. He was blinded by arrogance and greed. He could not see that sentient beings that were efficiently operating a complex recycling plant with a sophisticated language and culture could not exist as slaves forever. They revolted and regained their freedom. The enslaved tribe earned its independence from its oppressor, which happened to be him. A bitter pill to swallow. It was all he could do to keep his emotions hidden. "Is this the only farm of this kind?" Squish asked, as nonchalantly as he could. "Yes, these are our holy lands. It is the only field where we can grow the fruit." Jump noticed Squish staring at the large building across the field. "That's the dormitory, where they sleep," he volunteered. They had what they came for, and it was time to get out. Squish turned to Jump and remarked, "Well, I must say that we are impressed with your operation. My report will be quite favorable. Although you must understand that we are only in the initial stages in the procurement process. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I need to get back to the company and submit my recommendations. Could you please drive us back to our lander from here?" "Yes, of course," Jump replied. "I must confess right now," he explained, "the company is facing some financial difficulties. You are in a good position to obtain a substantially discounted price." Wow, a last-minute pitch, thought Squish. This guy is good. I'll be sure to mention that to my supervisor. Squish blew him off, then asked, "Is it possible for you to drive us straight back to the spaceport from here?" "Of course," Jump answered. He signaled the driver to return to the spaceport. As soon as he turned, Jump's comm device made a crunching noise. He listened intently to a message through his earphone. Then he signaled the driver to turn the vehicle around. "I'm sorry, but my supervisor would like a word with you before you leave, if that's all right with you." "Of course," Kisk answered, like they had a choice. Squish sensed that something was not right. They pulled up in front of a run-down, rusty jailhouse where 3 uniformed groins were standing in front of the door waiting. One of them walked out to the vehicle and motioned for Jump to get out. A guard bent down and said through the open door, "Mr. Squish, sorry to delay your ride, but we need to speak with Mr. Jump. It won't take long." The guards and Jump were talking a short distance from the vehicle. It all looked very relaxed until a groin pulled out a weapon and unceremoniously shot Jump in the head. His body collapsed into a lifeless pile right where he stood. Squish was stunned, then said, "Okay, that can't be good." 3 groins came up from the building and ordered them out of the vehicle, then forcefully ushered them into the nearby run-down jailhouse. One of the guards shoved Squish in front of a large alien that squatted down and pointed a small weapon at him. "Mr. Squish," he spoke politely, "we have received some information that you were contacted by a Creek agent before you left Co. Yes, they want to know what you are doing with those static stasis ships you're building, but our primary purpose was to shop for spacecraft." Listening up at the lander, Nadia commented, "Squish can think on his feet." "That is what he does," Maury confirmed. The guard explained, "We can't let you return with the information that the unfortunate Mr. Jump too eagerly supplied. Our supply of slaves must not be threatened, and we would prefer not to have to deal with an angry, powerful planet." "Why would we care what happens to those aliens?" Squish questioned. "We're just businessmen," he added, trying to squirm out of the situation. He thought that was a valid point, but received no reply. The chief groin stood up and growled loudly at the 2 guards in the room. They opened the cell door and forcefully ushered them in. "What's going to happen to us?" Squish demanded. They didn't answer. Squish slowly sat on the floor. His robe served to shield him from the cold. Soon, the groins started some kind of table game. It looked to Squish like they were gambling. After a short while, the chief groin stood up and walked to the cell and spoke. "For your information, the reason you're still alive is because you have stirred a debate among my superiors. Some want to kill you now, and others want to hold you for a substantial ransom." He paused, then said, "The ransom thing is a long shot." He returned to the game. Squish sat there a while, then looked over to the female human in the cell with them. She was huddled with a small girl in the corner. The woman's leg was swollen and bruised, and the child had gone to sleep. She would occasionally gaze over at her alien cellmates. Squish assumed she was here because they were deciding whether she was worth keeping alive. She was in considerable pain. Squish, Kisk, and Dost sat there in the dark cell. Only the whimpering of the woman and the occasional bantering from the groins broke the silence. Eventually, Squish spoke. "Sorry, guys, it looks like I can't think our way out of this one." Kisk replied, "Squish, you have this disturbing habit of making everything your fault. We all came into this thing with both eyes open. All of us knew the risk. Besides, because of us, the humans now know about their operation, and they have a powerful fleet that will soon get their people back. But I know this doesn't make up for what we did. If I have to die now, then this is the way I want to go." With that, They all fell asleep. Later that night, Squish was awakened by the sound of feet shuffling outside the door. The three Groins were fast asleep in their chairs. Then all hell broke loose. The door violently flew open. The child screamed in terror as several human soldiers stormed into the room. One of the soldiers yelled, "Hold your fire! There's a kid in here!" Before the Groins could reach for their weapons, the humans dragged the guards across the room, handcuffed them, then sat them on the floor against the wall. A soldier walked up to the cell door and wrapped a wire around the latch. He pulled on a string, then stepped back, and with a soft pop, the door swung open. It melted the metal latch. He pulled off his helmet and reached to his forearm and switched on his translation unit. "Mr. Squish?" he asked. "Yes, that's me," Squish confirmed. "I'm Sergeant Bilkins. An ocean." "An ocean?" Squish repeated, confused. The human looked annoyed at the translation unit. "An Earth soldier," he rephrased. The translation device had a problem with the term, marine. "I have orders to take you back to your lander, but we have to wait here for the rest of our unit to drop and secure the main building." "Drop?" Squish asked. "Yes, go see." He pointed toward the door. He walked to the door and looked out. To his astonishment, he saw many soldiers floating down on large canopies. As soon as they landed, they quickly formed up. Several more soldiers arrived and entered the building with Squish. The sergeant had turned his attention to the injured woman and her child huddled in the corner. They both looked frightened and uncertain of what was happening. He took notice of her injury and keyed the radio, then called, "Mario." "Mario here," a voice answered. "Are any medics down yet? We have an injured civilian." "Yes, on his way." A short while later, a soldier came in and kneeled down next to the woman. This soldier wasn't carrying a weapon or equipment like the others. "What's wrong?" he asked her. "I broke my leg and can't walk. We're in here because they had to decide if we were worth keeping alive." The soldier smiled and said, "It's okay. We're here to take you home." The recent events occurred so quickly that she had difficulty processing them. She looked across the room at the unhappy alien overseers sitting on the ground. Without their ability to bully and terrorize, they appeared pathetic. She eyed the guard, with his weapon ready, watching over them. She watched the busy soldiers with the familiar American flag patch on their shoulders. Some of them had raised their visors and would smile if they happened to look her way. Closing her eyes, the woman allowed herself the thought that just moments earlier was unthinkable. She squeezed her daughter and whispered, "It's over. We are going home." The medic searched through his pockets and produced a bag of assorted candies, which he offered to the girl. The child's eyes lit up and reached out and grabbed a handful, then snuggled back to her mother. He turned his attention to the woman's leg and opened his medical kit, and pulled out a portable X-ray unit, then wrapped it carefully around the injured leg. It clicked, and an image of her leg bone appeared on the small screen. "It's just a hairline. You'll be fine," the soldier remarked. Out of a larger bag, the medic took out 2 bottles of water and handed them to her. "You're dehydrated, so don't drink too fast, or you will get sick." With a small cotton swab, he cleaned a small area of her swollen leg, then injected it with a small syringe. She winced, then almost immediately looked up to him and smiled. "This will ease the pain until you get to the aid station on the transport ship." "Thank you," she spoke timidly. Squish was impressed with the empathy of the soldier, and he could tell that he was speaking to her in her native language, because he wasn't using a translation device like the other soldiers. 2 soldiers carefully placed the woman onto a stretcher, then they lifted her up and started out the door. The woman stopped them, then turned and motioned for the medic who treated her leg. When he came over, she leaned up and kissed him on the cheek. The little girl grinned and waved goodbye to him as they were leaving out the door. He grinned and waved back. The plan was for all the troops to be on the ground before they stormed the dormitory. The sergeant reached up and touched his earpiece, then announced, "They're all down. Let's move out." The Marines guided Squish and his team across a field to the dormitory. They entered the building and got to witness the moment of liberation. The Marines had already secured the compound, but hadn't entered the building in force. The lights flashed on in the large central room. The sight was horrific, and the smell was worse. The building was a long, abandoned, dilapidated warehouse. The floor was covered with metal cots, filled with ragged humans. Someone with a bullhorn blasted out, "Wake up! Wake up! We're soldiers from Earth, and we've come to take you home. Transport ships are on their way, so stay where you are, and we will guide you out when it's time to go. I repeat, don't be scared. You will soon be on your way home. They can't hurt you anymore." There was much confusion and doubt at what was happening. Many thought that this was a cruel joke played by the Groins. To prove that this was for real, the soldiers had rounded up the overseers that had cruelly tormented them and herded them to the center of the room. They watched as the soldiers paraded them down the center aisle. As the Groins were walking down the aisle, a woman reached down and scraped some of the purple fruit pulp from the bottom of her shoe and flung it at the face of the nearest alien. He reacted as if she had thrown fresh fecal matter on his face. He growled angrily and vigorously scraped it off, then turned toward the woman to attack, but the nearby soldier raised his weapon slightly. It was enough to clearly communicate to the alien what would happen if he did. Her action inspired the rest of the humans, and soon a torrent of purple fruit rained down on the alien overseers. Their reaction to the pulp was similar to the first one. That incident removed any doubt as to what was happening. Some of them ran up, knelt down, and cried at the feet of the embarrassed Marines. A Marine officer walked up behind Squish and tapped him on his shoulder. "Sir, we have a copter waiting to take you and your team back to your lander." He led them to a waiting multi-bladed helicopter parked just outside the door. They climbed in, and as they lifted off, they could see that 2 large landers had landed right on top of the field where the humans had been toiling. When they arrived at the spaceport where the lander was parked, they found a team of Marines had previously secured the area. They ran into their lander, and the soldiers climbed in the copter, and each flew off in different directions. As soon as they boarded the exec ship, they got the hell out of there. After tossing their clothes in the incinerator, they all took a shower and then gathered in the game room. An attempt was made to include Nadia in an alien table game. It was not successful. They settled down to talking about their adventure with the Groins. Something had been bothering Squish about the rescue operation. He turned to Nadia and politely inquired. That was an amazing operation. I've worked in logistics long enough to know that a mission like that should have taken weeks or longer to put together. How did you organize it so quickly? Actually, it was the result of a lucky guess, she replied. We had no direct evidence of what they were up to. Their radio transmission patterns, size of the operation, and some reports of unusual disappearances led us to suspect that they were kidnapping people. But it was one of many theories we had floating around. No one was sure. We did receive a report of an informant claiming to work for a criminal cartel. He claimed that it was operating a strange human trafficking scheme. His story seemed outlandish. Buying people with gold bricks was just too much of a fantasy story, she explained. And how would they get past our impenetrable early warning system? Industrial espionage was the prevailing explanation. The source was deemed unreliable and ignored by everyone except my father. My dad just had a feeling in his gut. Fortunately, he's a powerful general in Space Command and ordered a rescue detachment to be deployed not far away, just in case. I'm glad he did, Squish replied. When we agreed to do this, I just assumed that rescue was not an option. Nadia explained, as long as we could track you, we had an extraction team ready. But operations like that from orbit would have taken some time. You were lucky that they had decided not to kill you right away. Everyone had retired to their cabins, except Squish. He got bored and couldn't sleep. Well, I've been goofing off for too long, time to get to work, he said to himself. He sat down at his computer terminal. When he logged on, an error message popped up on the screen. It read, "Terminal access denied." Another message appeared. "It's not happening." The messages were from Goxus. "I know you, and I know you're trying to get back to work. I've ordered my tech people to lock you out of your terminal." More messages began to pop up. "For too long I've been urging you to take a vacation, and now I've resorted to drastic action. I've booked a 10-day luxury package with unlimited credits on Casino Station for all of you. Everyone's family will meet you there. They're on their way. Don't worry about the company. I was running it back when you were shitting yellow. Have fun. See you when you get back." The screen went blank. Wasn't expecting this. Squish said to himself, "Well, I guess I'm going to take some time off," he said as he logged off. They had a great time on vacation and stayed much longer than planned. Eventually, they returned home and fell into their regular routine. There was only one more unusual event. Squish, Kisk, and Dost were invited to Earth so they could be presented with a medal for bravery. Squish found Earth fascinating and returned often and traveled extensively throughout the planet. He became the foremost authority on Earth culture. Squish was appointed the first ambassador from the co-planetary system. Squish and Nadia became close friends, and together they developed many avenues of cultural exchange. Because of this, Earth and Co. entered a new era of cooperation, and Earth became a significant player in the established planetary system. It was the happiest time of Squish's life. I hope you enjoyed the story. So, if you like my work, please like and subscribe, and I would really like to know what you think of my story. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, these videos share a storyline that begin with a book I wrote titled Meanie and Kaka. It follows the story of when Melanie Baxter, a high-powered accountant, takes on a position of chief financial officer of a troubled company on Millennia, a colonial planet. Her troubles became significantly worse when, on a routine resupply mission, the space station she was in was attacked by an alien ship. She eventually finds herself and a small crew stranded on an alien planet. Now they must find a way to ally themselves with the local aliens so they can help them call for help and get back home. It is available on Amazon Kindle.